Good afternoon, everybody. Excited to be here today. I would like to start off by a tribute to my hero and mentor, who really inspired me to follow my dream of wanting to protect wildlife. I actually started a wildlife club in high school. Then I got to hear about Dr. Jane Goodall, and I was really inspired. Reading her books and meeting her as a vet student in London. I'm so sad to hear that, it was shocking to hear this news, actually just before I gave a talk in North Carolina, UNCW. And this was the last photo I took with Dr. Jane Goodall when she came to Uganda 2 years ago. I was with our youngest son, Tendo, who's been in the national visiting wildlife since he was 2 months old. And Dr. Jane Goodall wrote the foreword for my book, Walking with Gorillas. May she rest in peace and power. She also gave my mother an award. Thank you. She also gave my mother an award. That's my mother. And why is this photograph so important? My mother is somebody who has really encouraged me to follow my dreams. She was one of the first female politicians in Uganda and empowered so many women. That's why Jane Goodall gave her an award, because Jane Goodall not only promoted and supported protection of species, but she also was very passionate about women empowerment. So she gave my mom an award, she gave me an award, and she gave our organization, Conservation Through Public Health, an award in 2018. I took my mother to visit the gorillas in 2000. She was 70 years old. She was so scared about the gorillas before I told her I really want to work with gorillas. She's like, no, they're going to maul you. King Kong, Hollywood was making her scared of the gorillas. But when she finally saw them, she said, oh, they're just gentle vegetarian giants living in a big salad bowl. And this time she actually tracked gorillas in a skirt. I've never seen my mother wearing trousers in my life. And the local communities warmed up to her because the women there don't wear trousers either, and they brought her crafts. She's always supported my work, and so it was devastating when, beginning of August, my mother passed on at the age of 96. Having made a big speech, so just like Dr. Jane Goodall, she passed on, she transitioned while working. May she also rest in peace, power, and glory. Bwindi National Park is the second stronghold of the mountain gorillas. I finally got to study them as a vet student in 1994, when my mom finally said, it's okay. She let me do whatever I want, but the gorillas freaked her out a bit. And as I was driving to Bwindi, this is what I saw. And this became a familiar scene. Very beautiful, but I was quite struck by the hard edge between the community and the park. How many of you here have seen mountain gorillas? Great. It is really a once-in-a-lifetime experience for those who haven't seen them, and I would encourage you to see them. This was the first mountain gorilla I saw. It's not a very clear photo, but it's a very emotional one. He was called Kachupira because when they were habituating him, he had a broken hand. And that day, he was the only male gorilla we saw. He wasn't actually heading the group. The rest of the group were not there. And when I looked at Kachupira, I looked into his eyes. I felt a very deep connection. And I felt I really need to protect this species. First of all, seeing how little habitat they had left, and the fact that when I just arrived, I was sick, and I couldn't see them for 1 week. And I realized that actually I can really make them sick because I had a nasty flu. And I felt I really want to protect the gorillas because there are only about 300 left in Bwindi, 350 in Virungas, only 650 in the whole world. So I thought to myself, just as, I now want to become a full-time wildlife vet, and I eventually did. I wrote to the executive director of the national parks and told him what a vet does, and I became Uganda's first wildlife vet. So mountain gorillas are so special. I've learned so much from them. They are just like us. They have very strong family bonds. The babies are very playful. They like to disturb their moms and dads. The moms are great mothers. I've learned how to be a good mother because of them. The silverbacks are also great dads. Mountain gorillas are really amazing. And the moms just love taking care of their young. And the babies look at you when you come and show off. So they're very much like humans. In fact, there's a tourist who said to me, "That baby gorilla is so cute. It's cuter than my grandson." And that's saying something, because for my mother, she was so in love with with her grandchildren. So by the time someone says that, then you can see how special gorillas are. And so we've been looking after them for a long time. A few years later, we founded Conservation Through Public Health, and my husband was the second founder member. He donated $100 to add to mine, and we started the NGO here in America, and then we got a third founder member, the nonprofit, when we're in North Carolina. So it's so important to look after the gorillas, and we're pleased that the female rangers are increasing. She's actually a female ranger. When I started out, there were no female rangers, and now 20% are female. And the mountain gorillas' numbers have grown. This is a very encouraging sight to see. We're seeing it's much easier to find them, and the numbers have grown, and due to many successful conservation efforts, improved veterinary care. There wasn't any when I started out, and now there's great veterinary care for the mountain gorillas, improved community engagement. Some of the money from tourism is shared with the local communities. Most of the people hired are from the communities, and some money goes to support the local community. So tourism has really helped the mountain gorillas, because the money goes to patrol the park. I participated in the very first gorilla census in 1997, when we counted 300 gorillas to add to the 350 in Virunga, and the numbers have steadily grown to the point that IUCN downlisted gorillas from critically endangered to endangered in 2018, although there are only just over 1,000 left in the wild. So we want to keep up with this trend, and it always warms my heart when a new baby gorilla is born. It always gives me a lot of hope. This is a newborn baby. But there's this big threat which is stopping the numbers continuing to grow, and currently now we're carrying out a census at Bwindi, and we hope to count more. But there is a very hard edge between the community and the park, as you can see. So this was the first sight I saw when I arrived into the park. They said, "This is Bwindi." And I'm like, "What?" I was living near here the first time I went. And the gorillas can come out, because when they lose their fear of people, they go back to places they used to range before gorilla tourism began. But people are only allowed in for tourism, research, and other controlled activities. However, the number of gorillas that are habituated have increased. So it started off with 2 for tourism. Now there's 27 habituated gorilla groups for tourism in Bwindi and 1 in Mugahinga, in the Virungas. And as you can see, they're habituated and they're living anytime they're going outside the park. So we find that 50% of the habituated gorilla families have some of their range outside the park, which is a big issue. And so over here is the biggest thing we're worried about, is that very narrow neck. It's actually the same size as San Francisco and Oakland. And it's a really tiny park. It's just 321 square kilometers. So then we want to expand the neck. This is the area that is the biggest concern, because once you cut the neck, the gorillas will not be able to cross from the southern sector to the northern, and most of them are in the southern sector. They only range a little bit around the neck, and so it's more like the Bay Bridge that's connecting San Francisco and Oakland. So what happens? Because of this, they're always going out, they're eating people's banana plants, because people grow a lot of crops around the area. This particular gorilla is a blackback who decided to venture out, quite far out of the park, to come and try and eat, things in community gardens, plants and banana crops. And that happens all the time. They destroy people's livelihoods and people get upset. But if they're benefiting from tourism, they can tolerate the gorillas a bit more, but if they're not, they won't. They also love to eat the bark of the trees. And when they encourage people to plant trees so they don't have to cut trees in the forest, this also happens. as well. So we've been, over time, with support from WCN, we've been training the rangers and the gorilla guardians to herd gorillas back when they come out, to give them, to make sure they don't get sick from the communities. It is quite difficult herding them, the big silverback and everything. Like, you can herd them, then they come out the other side of the forest. They're quite cheeky. But we have strong men who are very proud of themselves, because now they're empowered to do something about the situation, and they're supported by the Wildlife Authority and CTPH. We support them and give them livelihood projects and teach them to herd the gorillas back to the park. And we also teach them to collect fecal samples from the night nests when they nest in community land, because that's when they're most likely to pick up diseases from the community, which is something that we've been doing, improving community health so that they don't make the gorillas sick. And we regularly analyze them in our Gorilla Health and Community Conservation Center. So that's Stephen, our third founder member. But how do we ensure a long-time future for the gorillas? We need to secure 1,000 acres of the yellow. We need 1,000 acres, and it's going to cost $10,000 per acre, $10 million. And you may wonder, this is a lot of money. Why is it a lot of money? Because this is a very high tourism area. The money from gorilla tourism contributes 60% of the money for the whole of the national parks in Uganda, of which there are 12 national parks, 10 national parks, and 12 wildlife reserves. So 60% of the revenue for the government comes from gorillas, and there are many lodges. When I wrote Working with Gorillas and published it in 2023, there were 70 lodges, and now there's probably 80 or more. So if we don't buy the land from the community, they'll sell it to the tour operators, because now tourism has come back up after the pandemic. So we met with the community members a few months ago, and we looked at the area of the neck. Where we're pointing is the area of the neck. Had meetings with them to talk about the need to buy this land. They'd rather sell it to us than to a tour operator, because they've become conservationists. They want the gorillas to have a secure future. And they know that the more gorillas they are, the more their children will benefit, because they've really lifted them out of poverty, and the more that tourism will thrive. So we worked with a lawyer, Maureen. She went with Ebenezer, our trusted staff member, to meet the local leaders and to meet the communities. And we sat down and got free, prior, and informed consent from 277 landowners. And they all agreed that they want to sell their land to us. As soon as possible. And in fact, by the time they left, more landowners came up wanting to sell their land. So it's a race against time, because they also went with the surveyors, and we mapped out the area that is urgent. So the area that's most urgent, where we got informed consent, is the red area, and it's 300 acres, of which we need $3 million to secure it as soon as possible. I get phone calls all the time. When are you coming to buy our land? People really want to sell land to increase the protected habitat for the mountain gorillas that have changed their lives. And so the threats continue. The building up in the area is continuing. For those who've been to Buhoma side of Bwindi, this is what you see. There's more and more infrastructure, more and more lodges are going to come up. And so it's a race against time, because if we're able to secure the land, it's going to be a win-win situation for the gorillas, for the community, for conservation, and for tourism. And the numbers will continue to grow. So if we want to keep seeing gorillas forever, our children, our grandchildren, we really need to protect them. And we want that trend to keep getting bigger, the gorilla to keep getting bigger and bigger as we keep going for the future. And we need support from the WCN donors. Thank you so much for supporting us so far. But this is an opportunity to really secure the habitat for our closest cousins. Thank you.